Let's start right away. So yeah, this is the talk I'll be giving today, AI Jockey, Guardrails, and tips for AI-assisted technical writing. And oh, yeah, let me turn on my camera again. Hello. Yeah, who am I? I'm Vladimir Izmalkov. I work as a technical author at Canonical, who is famous for their Ubuntu operating system, most famous Linux, I guess. I'm also a member of ISTC, full member, and I have quite a few degrees, including a PhD. And I consider myself a Doxus code advocate. Basically, I do it a lot for my work, and I also do some mentorship, free mentorship on NDP list, again, for people who want to advance their careers, I guess. And I've been producing some developer-oriented software documentation for more than 15 years, and now I'm considering myself somewhat of a skeptic when it comes to AI. There is so much hype about the topic, but just recently I've been using it out of necessity to explore the new tool that everyone keeps talking about, and I find it actually quite useful for many use cases, which we will cover today. And first, let me actually talk about some pros and cons of using AI for documentation purposes, just to align better with everyone for the rest of the discussion. So basically, the light side, right? So the pros. Uh, my personal favorite that LLMs are very effective as a cue for the blank page syndrome. Basically, get a draft and then go into work of rewriting it. It's my favorite. It actually helped me a lot throughout some of the challenges, including creating this presentation. But we'll get to that later. Also, it's quite good for information architecture, as in AI and LLMs in general are quite good at structuring and grouping information, existing information you provided with in the context. So yeah, you can find some unusual ways to group it if you explore some variations and just ask it. You provide alternative, grouping maybe. There is also a notion of it being able of very efficiently refactor everything, like rewrite for clarity or simplify or improve the terminology usage or reduce the jargon, explain it a little bit better, or just completely change the style. So there are so many ways you can refactor the existing content very fast with it. The results, well, we'll talk about that on the dark side. Uh, the variance generator is in basically you can also create a different alternative versions of the existing content here. That's actually quite powerful tool for refactoring too, I think. Well, basically, if you are based like me, not native speaker in English, you can sometimes struggle to put your message through in a most elegant form and way. It can do pretty good job for you. You can work together with some LLM to provide you with just simple synonyms, simple rewrites, like one paragraph at a time, one sentence at a time, just provide you with alternatives that you choose from. Just don't go, rewriting the whole thing at a glance. If you go with chunks, it's much better, but we'll get to the tips later. Also, review partner, you don't need to ask, for a peer review from a person somewhere who also has their plan and so on. This one, the AI LLMs and other AI systems, they're basically always ready for you. They're always ready to provide some feedback to you. No one says the feedback is perfect, but at least it's there. So it's a very good review partner at that. Also, I want to reinforce the idea that the knowledge inside these systems is tremendous. They basically know a lot of things like Wikipedia, encyclopedia, so you can ask them about a lot of concepts, technical concepts. If they are very well known, the fat chance is the AI will tell you a lot of information about it. You cannot trust this information entirely, but still it's a good source of research initially, as long as you double check your sources afterwards. And also some examples and sample data could get, quite tedious to generate for your own documentation. And I find it quite interesting, the use case of using AI systems like large language models to generate those, to generate a simple code example, to generate some sample data for your, tutorial. Why not? It's actually pretty good at that. So on the dark side, though, we have very interesting items there. And my favorite is hallucinations. Yes, you cannot trust entirely the AI system because it can hallucinate and it will hallucinate. The question is not if, it's when. And this alone puts a lot of pressure, a lot of paranoia in people, and that's probably for good. You have to expect it to be not entirely reliable. You have to expect that it will try to deceive you, because on top of hallucinations, on top of just inventing facts and features and stuff like that. It's actually confidently wrong, and it's very persuasive at that. So basically, it's a system that was optimized to be persuasive, not correct. That's how it was made. And yeah, basically, it's some kind of interesting exercise at trying to figure out whether it's correct or not. If you cannot tell that by the way they talk and present the information, they always so confident about the material they give you. Unfortunately, also false precision. They can make up not only straight up facts, but also numbers and some proofs, and even sometimes excuses for, an error occurring. So troubleshooting can get pretty interesting with that if they invent stuff. Fortunately, this all interconnected with hallucinations, and there are ways to reduce the chances, but there's always a chance. So be aware of that. I like that citation cosplay, which is quite visible in the research community when, we create some interesting references that do not exist. Also, I believe there were news about the same stuff happening in a legal area. So yeah, it's my favorite, I guess, in terms of visibility and finding the hilarious examples outside in the wild world. Semantics drift when, unfortunately, with a very long query, I quite often find that the LLM or AI systems, they struggle to keep on topic, keep narrowly scope. They try to blow the scope a little bit after a while and just produce something that looks good, but not exactly strictly semantically correct or on the topic. And also, again, non-deterministic results are not great if you want to create something reliably. You cannot expect it to provide the same result all the time. But interestingly enough, the polish that it puts on, basically the wording looks like someone really tried, especially if you prompt it correctly. The polish on top of the errors make the errors almost like invisible, especially for untrained people, especially for people less experienced with this. So the content looks like it's been effortful, that it's been basically designed in a very good way and put it together. But when you read it, like factually, it can be completely incorrect or very flawed at very least. So at a glance, it looks much better than it is in real life. So that's actually quite challenging to recognize that, to understand that we must not trust your initial instinct at a glance. You just don't trust the look. Layers of polish can make it very hard to spot problems, unfortunately. And trust erosion, yes, some subtle mistakes, even a slight nod or some kind of evidence that you used AI systems and it looks like AI generated can put so much damage to your trustworthiness in your technical documentation, especially for technical documentation, because it's usually considered to be a source of truth, basically very uh, truthful material, very honest material with less marketing, less everything that is not strictly speaking on topic and correct. So the AI generated stuff in there hurts a lot because of that, the trust erosion. Let's talk about how we actually tackle these challenges strategy-wise, like the bigger picture. So you might have seen this picture I used on LinkedIn to promote this talk. Basically, it's some of the advertised materials, and it's vivid, it's recognizable, it's attracting a lot of attention. The eye here is like a beast that we need to tame, and it's a great idea. It's very memorable and quite easy to understand at a glance. But the whole depiction, the whole idea is a little bit wrong. That's what's interesting about it. Basically, this is a reference what AI-generated texts often are. They're looking good, but factually incorrect. So what is wrong with this picture? If you look at it and you try just for a second here to imagine what would be the beta version, why this picture might be wrong for this talk. Well, if you guess that this is about basically fighting the beast instead of working with it to create something useful, you were completely right. This is basically a depiction of a rodeo bull rider who's fighting the bull. And I guess that's not what I want to do if we live in, even when we talk, when we take into account about this analogy, of the beast being AI systems. I don't want to fight them. I want to employ them to work for me and with me in synergy, very productive, and just get somewhere instead of just fighting them on the same spot. So what do we do instead? We work with them. We have these two different approaches that I call explore and exploit. Basically, they both show how we can use AI systems as tools and force multipliers. You see, that's not always easy to do so. Such powerful tool as, generative AI or agentic AI, it needs to be controlled to produce good results because, again, it's very, very powerful. It can get you a lot of stuff, but whether that's the stuff you wanted, it depends on many factors. So first, let's see um, the explore exploit in a little bit more detail. Basically, to achieve both of them talk about that to achieve the best possible results, we must work together with the AI, supporting each other, and doing our own role at the same time. It's called synergy, called working as a team. I want to reinforce this thought here that whenever you find yourself struggling, just check whether you actually working with AI or fighting it like the beast on the very first image. And let's talk about the AI joke here, how basically the whole talk is called, or the explore approach. Again, a little bit more meaningful name for it. What do we do here? We mount the beast and work together. We constantly steering, pacing, guiding it for moving faster and precise to cover great distances. We control the direction, the pace, the route, unless we don't. And then the beast runs in random direction with random speed at low chance of getting us where we want to be. You see, it's very simple approach of you directly interfacing with AI and trying to produce something meaningful. You have your goal in mind. You're trying to communicate that to AI. Of course, there might be some communication problem going on, but that's on to you. Like everything you say to AI, it's just a tool. Yes, it's non-deterministic, so it is tricky to do so, but it's still a tool. You controlling the communication, and sometimes you have to adapt. You have to adjust your approach. One, like not one, a list of things you need to remember is basically it's much faster to go on a horse rather than on foot. So if you want to go far, please use the horse. But some precise maneuvering when you're already in a rough area you want to be, well, quite often it's much easier to do on foot rather than on horse. So consider your distance, consider where you are right now before engaging in yet another round of riding. Also, you have to understand where you want to go. Without you understanding that, you won't be able to communicate that idea to, well, the AI system. And without you explaining that very well, what do you expect? There will be some result, but no way of telling whether it will be plausible or not. And also the verification of where you actually got versus where you wanted to be would be quite tricky if you don't understand where you want to be. You see, so checking where you are upon arrival would be almost like impossible. Uh, so if we try to put this analogy a little bit closer to real world, when you try to generate some new content with generative AI like LLM system, it's the Explorer method, at least I think so. I would say that Explorer is about you directly trying to achieve some result. Most often I see that when we're using these chat systems like ChatGPT, basically interacting in a prompt environment with some context to it, but more or less iteratively. You have a prompt, you have response, like this kind of querying system. It moves fast and precise like a scalpel, so it's very nice. You can go in iterations, but it's not exactly for covering, great areas of work because it would be too much iterative. It's a little bit too non-deterministic for that. So we have a second approach, which I call the exploit approach, or as per the image AI plowman, right? So we have our beast tamed already, and we use this contraption, the plow, to actually process, well, in this image, it's field. We're basically trying to cover all the area in a very consistent way. So the quality of it matters, the systematic approach matters, the coverage that matters. You see lots of things that matters, but well, not exactly the speed of you getting from point A to point B. More like the consistency of the result over some great area. Now, that's what I call the exploit approach, when you actually need to do a lot of work, sometimes manual work, sometimes less so, but still. But you have to do it across like a big set of documentation. For example, you need to refactor something, you need to adjust some solution or check for some specific things in the documentation. Why we don't want to do both at the same time, cover big area and do some drastic changes, like some sophisticated changes, because it will be very hard to check the result at the end. So I would totally advise you to go with the explore approach if you want to do something sophisticated, or exploit approach if it's more like a simplistic job but at a scale that you need to scale up. Of course, there are some cases that need to combine both, but those are most tricky ones. So yeah, applying lots of changes to your documentation and checking results at the end. At least you can check them selectively. Again, since we're talking about the big area, sometimes it's not humanly possible to check everything. So at least selectively. Your work there would be to correct the beast in the process, which is not always possible, but at the very end, you always check the result. That's quite important here, but also at the beginning, before you even start, working with the AI system, you need to plan the field. You need to plan the scope of the task, what should be affected and what should not, and what should be done. Basically, the vision of the goal. That's important. And you should minimize your own involvement in the work, as in let the beast do the work, not yourself. You do the checking after it. And this is interesting. Basically, when you do either explore or exploit, I think you need to think. I think you need to take into account at least this triad. Basically, you have original goal in mind. That's good if you know what you want. But when you try to communicate it to AI via some prompt, you actually building a specification. You build an exact requirement that AI will read and follow. So this specification is a cornerstone for everything that will follow. First of all, AI system will use this specification to actually generate the stuff, and it's totally fine. Some people try to, participate in this, as in help AI to add some content. Well, again, it's more efficient for it to let the AI to do the work, unless it's something very experimental and something that AI is really struggling on. For example, some niche topic that it doesn't have too much of a idea about. So yeah, let the AI to take the most of the work, at least there. You can help it, but your task will be to provide the best possible specification. And many people kind of forget or overlook the possibility of actually employing AI to produce a better specification. So this step of actually not just writing specification on your own, then sending it and getting the result out of AI system, but the step of you working on the specification first, on your set of requirements with the help of AI. Many people actually overlook that, but I feel like it's an important tool. You don't have to use it always, only for more sophisticated tasks, but it's quite efficient at that. If you really have something in your mind that you're struggling to put together, it's kind of long and sophisticated. It might be better to employ AI to help you with the specification first. That's great. It creates a little bit of interesting, layered approach, but still, it's a great tool. Use it responsibly. And another interesting step is verification. Some people think it's just, oh, I have to read everything after AI generated. Well, yes, that's the idea. That's the best practice, but it's not always possible. Again, if it's a lot of stuff that got generated, or it's quite a complicated topic that you have. Not enough subject matter expertise, let's put it like that, to actually make a judgment call, then it can be tricky. And again, you can employ AI for the verification step, but it's a very interesting challenge because again, AI generating and then AI actually checking on that, it's on its own work is well, it's some positive feedback. I'm not sure it's a good thing to do. So what I prefer instead, I try to think about it a little bit more algorithmically for when I do verification. We need to go into verification step either completely manually for me to make all the judgment, or I need to create some kind of algorithm, maybe with the help of AI, maybe even build a script to let the AI to run it, the script, to build the script, to run the script and get the results without involving the reasoning, the famous reasoning that can hallucinate and bring you all kind of disaster. So that would be the trick. Sometimes AI can reason on top of itself and produce something interesting, but I would say that it's still quite a last resort. Prefer to have either a human being or an algorithmic script or any other algorithmic approach like program instead of that. Well, with that in mind, this is kind of a whole idea throughout the talk. Technical writing itself is changing, and we need to adapt with that. You see, to stay in the saddle, we need to adapt. We have the same mission, really, but many other new and very powerful tools than we had before, and it's a great opportunity for us to grow. We do need to level up. We do need to step up our efforts to use these tools just to stay, relevant, I guess. Otherwise, people who actually do that will be doing at least faster work. I wouldn't put it at better work, but sometimes even better. Yeah, totally. Let's talk about the adoption roadmap, basically the route that you can take to actually adopt some of these AI systems to your documentation practices. Well, I find it useful that recently I've seen many times this AI adoption framework or AI usage levels for software engineering. So we do the analogy here. Basically, what I've seen so far, there are many different ones, but what I've seen so far was like manual coding is level 0. Then we have AI assisted tools, basically autocomplete with some extra steps. And the next level will be code generation. Well, why not? Just generative AI, LLMs, and so on. But the next step after that would be agentic coding, which is quite interesting, I find. It's a very powerful tool. I've used it to some great results. Sometimes it can be struggling with some particular tasks and use cases, but there are cases where it's quite useful and quite efficient at that. But starting from the level 4, it gets very very tricky and actually tricky to apply that for documentation production too. Multi-agents orchestration, it's basically when you use the agentic approach but you try to scale it up to agents working together with each other, some agents even controlling other agents, orchestrating them, and they trying to basically mimic how a team of developers would work, or a team of technical writers in our case, which is understandable. It's how we think, so why not try to scale it that way? Sometimes it works, sometimes it's not, but it's very, very new and complicated area. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. I don't think I am myself yet on this level of AI usage. I mostly do agentic coding at the moment, so yeah, that's probably a little bit out of scope for this talk, unfortunately. And level 5, yeah, for software engineering, they call it dark factories, which is all about creating a very elaborate specification with some AI-assisted writing, of course. And the point being that we also create a system of tests, and these tests are invisible or inaccessible to AI. So AI can run them, but AI cannot see what's inside the test. The tests are black boxes. That creates an environment when AI cannot play the tests since it doesn't see them. It only sees the specification. So AI tries its best to satisfy both the specification and to pass the tests. That's actually good idea in many ways. It has to go through a very elaborate process to do that. But again, agentic AI can do iterative development. So I guess it can be quite interesting. I'm not sure how efficient that is. It's very new. Again, I've seen a few publications, including one that I put at the end of this slide deck as a link to someone else's blog post. So for documentation production, though, we have some kind of analogy that I tried to put. So level 1 is manual writing. Then we do some prompting through chat systems like chatbots, ChatGPT, and so on. Basically, you can use it in your web browser. You don't have to use any specific tools. But then you go a little bit further than that. So instead of going into some separate tool to send the prompt and then get the result and then copy paste it somewhere and then hopefully review it and adjust it for, human in the loop approach. Well, instead of doing all that effort, you can use some AI assisted tool in itself. So you can actually write the content in immediate tool that will let you use AI to improve the wording, to rewrite some stuff, to modify some stuff, to control some stuff. Basically, that's what I call AI assisted tooling, when you use the tool to write and the tool itself provides you with such capabilities. That's actually quite efficient in many cases. It's a bit advanced though. The best case scenario I know is using IDEs, integrated developer environments, like developers do. So it's most applicable for Dox's code approach and the likes. Well, the next level is the same as engineering, I guess, agentic writing as a comparison in comparison to agentic coding. It's actually, again, quite good for Dox's code when you have like a repository or for your documentation content, and you can ask AI to actually go there and check all the files for something or refactor everything, change the structure so it can use the file structure in the repo, analyze the structure that you actually publish the documentation with, analyze the syntax, analyze everything that's inside the repo with you, including some like loadmd, agentmd files, which provide additional context. So lots of tricks and lots of additional synergies there with everything that is basically being used by the coders, by the software engineers. We can use the same in this step. Well, then, like I said, level 4, level 5, kind of advanced steps. I probably should not go that far for now, but let's say for documentation production, I see it as multi-agents orchestration still at level 4. Haven't encountered any useful use cases for that yet, other than at least trying to produce a complicated set of documentation for a product immediately. And the last step, I'm not entirely even sure how to call it. Let's call it like dark docs factories with the analogy with dark factories. I guess there are some challenges to tackle there. Mostly we're talking about trying to fully automate documentation writing through some specifications. So you assume the role of some kind of a product owner that writes a specification of requirements for documentation. And basing on this specification, you build in this agentic system that will iterate over it and hopefully produce something good. The problem is here we still need to test it. And how do you test documentation? Well, there are many ways to test documentation, but how do you test, the writing itself, the factual correctness of it? I'm not entirely sure. So I'm not entirely sure the whole level is possible for documentation production. At least I haven't seen that anyway yet. Well, this is the same slide that I put some notes on, and let's move through here. This is the slide to explain a little bit how the progress through the skills might look like and what are the skills. Of course, it's not an exhaustive list. It's just to give you some idea what's going on here. Basically, when you go through, adoption of initial AI tooling like ChatGPT or any other prompt system in your web browser, maybe you just go through basics like what is a prompt, how to build prompt, what results to expect, what information you need to put there to get the result correctly. Uh, this kind of stuff, this is basic proficiency in prompt engineering at best, but it's it's quite initial experience. So when you try to move to next levels, you probably get more experience with using it to a better degree and just gaining more experience. Really, that's what matters. And I cannot reinforce this entirely enough. You have to try different tools. You have to try different models, different software, different use cases, because the combinations work very differently. And of course, the hallucinations, the non-deterministic results, it doesn't help you. So you basically need to build your own statistics, but I'll get back to it later. For now, you have to understand there are many skills you can build, and they will be building through your experience and experimentation. So don't stop trying. Let's go into more practice this time instead of strategy. So we will talk about some tips and guardrails that we can employ for using such systems directly, but also then we will switch to some real life examples of mine, how I used it and what went wrong, what went good, like everything. Some tips for beginners first. Basically, you have to start with some topic that you have some subject matter expertise at, right? Otherwise, you won't be able to validate what the result is. You won't be able to understand when AI is hallucinating and putting some non-plausible results there, really. You can rely on some technical expertise outside. So basically ask for technical review from your engineers or like fellow colleagues or everyone or anyone available to you. But again, it will be much easier if you yourself have this subject matter expertise just to go faster and have the first uh, first idea, basically, what's going on there and how close you're getting to the something good, basically defining the good inside your head. Also, like I said before, you have to experiment with different tools, and ideally, you need to start building your own library of use cases, understanding, okay, for this particular use case, like I want to do this. Last time I used this kind of model, this kind of tool, and it worked, like, okay, let's try something different. Let's try, this other model, this other tool, and see for yourself how it works for you, what the result, how you can maybe compare the approach that was given you there, the quality of the result, and decide for yourself. And ideally, decide not from one single example, but from some kind of statistics. Depends on how many of these tasks you have. So basically build your own library of tools and use cases and how efficient they were. Maybe even solving the same task with different tools and models just to see which one was better, using the best ones. So this way you will basically have a library of success. So next time you have this use case, you already have tried a few things and you know what's working. One note here, it all changes quite fast. So some models go, updated, then they change in the behavior. Most of the time when the model updates to a newer version, it's supposed to be better, but it's not always the case, unfortunately. So take that into mind. So ideally, this library should include the model version because, again, a different version can behave differently. Uh, and also quite important trick here, you have to treat the AI results, the AI produced results as a draft, like a rough idea. It no way in your mind it has to be like this is good enough for publishing immediately. You always have to have this, mistrust for the end result. You don't have to expect it to produce the final document, the final anything really, even if it's just a paragraph of text. You always need to review it and approve on it before publishing it anyway, including it anyway important. So treat it as a draft assistant, not like a colleague that can produce meaningful results. That would be best working. Also, yeah, if you use an AI a lot, I feel like it can be detrimental for your own development and learning experience. And I noticed that a lot, especially in, some junior technical writers who use AI tooling a lot. So what I noticed that you can mitigate that risk, that problem, if you try applying AI in a smaller chunks. Basically, you do the rewrites, like rewrite this stuff for clarity, or rewrite this, like a polite UK style English, something like that. So any type of rewrite, any type of adjustment, even small like content generation, but you do it in smaller chunks. You do it like one paragraph at a time, maybe a couple of paragraphs. Basically, the smaller the chunk is better. That puts you in very interesting positions that you would review it more thoroughly because you have smaller chunks. You don't have the fatigue out of reading a big blob of text, but also it puts you in a better position to adjust the chunks. If you do lots of smaller chunks, you can later rearrange them, you can rewrite them more easily. You see, you keep yourself in the loop, you keep yourself aware of everything that's going on. You can adjust it, and through that, through being fully aware of what got generated, whether it's good enough or not, deciding where to fit it, every this small decision would actually help your learning experience much better than just generating, a page, reading it very, lightly without too much of criticism, and just publishing. This, one chunk approach, it will be very detrimental for your own experience and learning, I think. Well, the next item is how do I put this? Basically, if you don't have a slightest idea what you actually want and you ask AI to, well, give me something on that topic and you don't know how the good is looking, like what is good basically, you will have a hard time checking the results. So basically AI will give you something, but how do you know if it's good? It's a tricky thing to do, right? If you don't know what exactly to expect there. So I find it interesting that if you already have the skills and knowledge to produce some content, you already know how to write a good tutorial on a topic or a good how-to guide on a topic. It's very interesting to see how AI does the job because, again, you have all the subject matter expertise and understanding to spot the problems here and there when you review the content, and it's working really great. So I would recommend at least starting with that to tackle the tasks that you already know how to solve yourself, and just using AI to do it faster, and also to explore how AI works for these tasks. That would work brilliantly, I think, especially keeping yourself in the loop for the reviews. Also, start getting used to read more than writing. That's unfortunate, and I totally understand that some people would, be not very happy with that. And I think myself, I also would prefer sometimes to write more. Unfortunately, that is the case. We are generating so much stuff, we cannot possibly to write this same amount in the same time. So yes, I'm reading a lot, I'm reviewing a lot, I'm fixing some problems, but I'm not writing as much as I used to. So something to take into account. The role is changing, like I said previously. Very interesting point here that basically you need to track all the changes that AI does to the content. And ideally, you have to have ability to save states. Like, let's say you do like prompting to AI and you asking it to do something and it did a thing and you're happy with it. You review it and you're happy with it. Okay, you have to have an ability to save it, like save the checkpoint basically, and then continue with some other prompt, maybe improve something else, so you can get back to the checkpoint if AI screws up with the results. That's a very important thing, and I think version control systems like Git are great tooling for that. They work just like we want it to be. Basically, you have the notion of commits that you can use to preserve history and to revert back in time to that point. So yeah, I mean, I cannot stress this enough. This is a very interesting tool to be able to navigate the changes that AI produces, to see all the changes that it produces, which is also quite important for reviews. So yeah, total recommend, and it's one of the main reasons, I guess, why it's the whole approach of AI-assisted writing have a huge synergy with Dox's code, because again, version control systems are used very actively there. Also, well, quite an easy advice, tackle low-hanging fruits. Just do it at scale, right? Don't fix a single page, fix the whole documentation for some kind of a typo or terminology question you have in mind and you want to polish out. That will be great power multiplier, exactly what we're looking for here. And next one is, well, tips for more seasoned writers. And the main one, not the main one, okay, the first one and one of the most important ones is responsibility is still a human thing. Basically, you most of the time you cannot call AI to be responsible for some mistakes that it does. Like, it's a system. Like, what do you expect? It's, well, basically a robot. It cannot, have a common sense. It cannot be feeling anything. Like, you cannot blame it. I mean, yeah, it did the mistake. So what? It's just, system. It works that way. You should expect these mistakes, but a human being can, and that's a difference, between having a human technical writer in a team versus just using AI systems. When you have a human, this human can be responsible. So you, as a technical writer in a team, assume this responsibility over documentation, like assume full responsibility. But this would involve a lot of, measures and controls and the guardrails that we will talk next. Also, don't stop exploring. If you settle too long for, one particular tool set, basically model and some software, they can, move past, because everything is changing so fast. Like, in a year of time, you'll find that all the models are different, they behaving differently, and the same tool set that worked for you previously doesn't work that well anymore. So you have to keep exploring, finding, different combinations that work best and different use cases to apply them. Also, pay attention to what usually goes wrong. It's interesting to actually have an idea what to look for when you review, but also, if anyone asks, like, why do we even need the technical writer? AI can do everything. You can easily point them, okay, like, AI can do something, but they cannot do that, and they always do these terrible mistakes, and I have to control them thoroughly. So you have to basically have an answer for why do we need you, and the answer should be a little bit better than I do the editorial review after AI generated stuff. Yeah, it's not enough, unfortunately. And the next one, invest into context engineering. Context engineering is a quite interesting topic. There are many layers to it, and it's path to success, I guess. There are so many things that could go wrong there, including the limitations of context of different tools, which can be different. But managing the context is a great way to actually achieve better results and to support the tool, the beast, to produce you better work. Basically, you invest into synergy in your team. That's how it sounds like. Assume ownership of the product. I already mentioned, the responsibility thing, but you also have to understand that AI is, I mean, it's great that it has all the confidence in the world and it can work so fast, but you have to be the one who makes decisions. Otherwise, I mean, AI will hallucinate and you won't even notice because it told you so. Yeah, you don't do that. Just assume ownership. You should be the leading leader in the team, and otherwise problems will occur. And also an interesting note about types of memory. Like there are so many different things that AI does and does rather well, but it all does it in the context. Basically, the context of the prompt, the whole prompt history, the files you provided with for the prompt. It's all called AI context, but also there is a static side to it. In your project, in your repository mostly, you can have this agent.md or claude.md file, which provides a static context for your project. It's a great way to improve the AI experience, especially if you have some build system involved to build your documentation, some testing involved, and you want AI to be, well, to make less mistakes with working with that. It's actually a great tool for that. And also you can put there some common sense, some, baseline knowledge about your product, again, to keep AI more or less streamlined in approach. And if you see AI making the same mistake over and over again, you can put it into the files and it will keep it in the context. So this is a great way of actually dealing with a more like a long-term memory you have in this project context. Also, as a long-term memory, the whole model itself, it was trained on some data set, so it has its own long-term memory of the whole things that it was learned on. Well, it's much less reliable, of course, because it's much bigger, but you can rely on that. And again, like I said, encyclopedia knowledge, you can query for that, especially if the topic is very well known and there are lots of materials over the internet. AI will be able to provide you some content and even reason on it just because of the sheer amount of the materials. But there's also a third component there, which is a meta memory. And basically, that's your own memory of how you ran, this prompt, what it showed you, where it went well, where it's not, and also the past use cases where also you tried something and it worked or it didn't. So all this meta memory about how the model behaves and what works and what not, this must help you in your experience. You should use that. You should rely on that as much as possible to get better results. And yeah, let's talk about the guardrails. Basically, there are guardrails for specifically every topic that we talked about over the dark side of things. We won't probably have enough time to cover all of them one by one, unfortunately. So let's at least try to summarize that before we go into some real life experience examples. Yeah, obvious one, I know, but just keep it in mind. Review the final product. You have to look at it. Don't push it straight into production without reading what AI wrote. It's a terrible idea. It could hit you very hard. So yeah, just review the final product. It's very important to have a human in the loop to check for these silly mistakes, silly mishaps, silly writing that AI quite often does, and to not be too lazy to fix at least some of these problems, the most obvious ones, to make it look so much better. That would help you to mitigate the trust erosion, for example, if you have all these interesting like M dashes like I have in this uh, title of the slide, I believe. There are so many small and easy tells that this content was probably AI generated. So if you really want to put in your documentation some content, just review it. Just don't let AI write your documentation. It helps you to do that. So do the review at the end and fix some of at least easy tails. Fix the most obvious problems. So make sure that it's factually correct. Make an extra effort after the AI. That's important. Um, that guardrail serves well, but it's not always possible to review everything. So again, automating the review in some way could be good. It's just making AI to review AI is probably not such a great idea, although possible. Shouldn't be the only one. So I think there always should be a human in the loop. So yeah, whether it's you or some engineer, that's a different story. Build your processes for AI-assisted workflows. That's exactly that. Peer reviews and technical reviews from engineers, and just build around this iterative approach with generated content being constantly reviewed before publishing, and reiterated if needed. That's the AI-assisted workflows. They could work a little bit different from human workflows because they can move much faster. Also, you can use AI to explain to you any, things you don't know. For example, you don't have subject matter expertise. You can ask AI itself about the stuff you don't understand to help you to review the stuff it wrote. That's totally fine. You can use it as asking questions and getting your own knowledge about the subject matter expertise. It's actually very good at that. Just don't ask about their reasoning and logic. They can lie. Limit the access, of course, that's very important, and most systems do it right now. Don't let it push immediately anything to the remote server. Work locally, that's ideally on your machine. So then you can do the push manually after verifying all the changes. That's a great guardrail that I use all the time, and it helped me a lot to spot many different interesting things. And also, reading your own content is much harder. When you wrote content and you spend so much time writing it, it's hard to read it and spot mistakes because you already wrote it, you know it to the letter, and you're just skipping through it. Like your brain optimizes, and you cannot see the mistakes. Well, that works differently when we're talking about AI-generated stuff. You didn't wrote this letter to letter, so you can read this at least once without it to be overwhelmingly boring or optimized by your brain. So do that. Just read the generated stuff. Read it thoroughly, fix it, rewrite it if needed. Just spend the effort. Be advised though, if you already rewritten it once and then ask AI to fix the stuff inside the same paragraph, you would have to read it again. It will be much more repeatable this time, so it will be much more boring, and the chances of you actually missing something will be higher. So self-review, you reviewing the stuff that got generated into AI in your repo is good, but the best case is when you do it only once. If you do it more than once, the accuracy is lower, unfortunately. Well, that's practical examples what works for me. When I told you need to build a library, that's exactly that. Basically, I figured out. So for me, ChatGPT actually sounds interesting for rewriting and paraphrasing. And that comes from a person who is non-native speaker. So basically, I use ChatGPT to rewrite for clarity. You write in a polite UK style some messages for me, and even in some documentation to adjust structure, to, again, improve clarity, this kind of stuff. For searching and researching some complicated topics, I prefer Gemini, and I think I used the 2.5 Pro, and now there is Gemini 3. Both rather good at researching some topic over the internet, especially technical ones. And for code development, I find that the best results I got through actually Claude Sonnet, I believe, Claude Sonnet 4.5. That's got me the best results, although I used it for many different topics. Most of them were developing some front-end stuff, because I hate working on front-end, like HTML, JavaScript. Yeah, it does that for me. And some Python scripts, some Tawation. Yeah, I think it does great job, especially in the agent mode, like agentic AI. For software, I just used GitHub Desktop, for example. Also web browser for ChatGPT and sometimes Gemini even. And VS Code, specifically with the Copilot plugin. And Canonical actually pays for our license. So we have a commercial license for Copilot, which actually works great. We can select the model. There is quite a high limit of premium queries there. So yeah, works great for me. The use cases I find most useful and interesting are generating content for widely well-known topics for LLMs. Of course, it's top-notch. Rewriting for clarity, again, works very well for me. It's actually very good at regex, regular expressions, for searching something specific or replacing something in your documentation. Creating CSS files, like the style files for front-end, it's very good at. And analyzing logs and troubleshooting. Well, it's actually pretty good that ChatGPT I'm using mostly for all of this stuff It's quite good even at troubleshooting, although initially I thought it would be hallucinating. It's actually not happening that much. The latest 5.2 model is quite good, and it even provides some links over internet that are quite relevant. For the agentic AI, yeah, build automation and tests. I did that many times, and I find it's one of the best ways to use it. Yes, testing stuff like building exact tests, so you can double check the logic in this test, like double check the algorithm of it is best. If you have a wide range of, documentation or some logic that you need to test, you cannot check whether like 100 different files were changed by AI in a correct way, but you can check a small script that AI prepared for you to do the same changes, you see? That works great, especially at scale, at least for me. Applied refactoring for documentation, again, worked for me rather well. I'll show you some examples in a second. And check consistency terminology surprisingly well. I used, again, the Claude Sonnet for that, and the terminology changes it suggested. I needed to do some research to actually figure out why it suggested, but at the end, it appeared to be completely correct. That what I would do if I do the research first time. So yeah, the real-time examples that I did basically for development, like I mentioned, the front-end development, we're developing some Sphinx theme for the canonical. It's called Ulvazi. And I'm using AI-assisted development for specifically the front-end, the CSS styles, the HTML, plus Jinja templates, the JavaScript logic that works on the website, but also for the Python logic that works during the build time of the docs, and also the tests for the whole theme. And in all of these cases, the agentic AI, specifically the Claude Sonnet, it worked rather well. Other models sometimes produce worse results, so I prefer Claude Sonnet as per my tests. For the major documentation work, basically, some refactoring I did is switching to US English from UK English. And it went very well, again, with the agentic mode of Claude Sonnet, which was able to figure out all the files that we need to go through and adapt them. It was quite correct, quite on the point. It was 4.5 again model. Some metadata description. Well, LLMs are really good at summarizing the page, so I think any LLM could do that. But again, agentic mode lets you to scale this approach to all the documentation pages at the same time. Like in a single prompt, it will just do that. And it took me like maybe 10 minutes of time. Yeah, went well. And it was like 50 or so pages. And converting from RST to Markdown, surprisingly good at that. A very simple syntax, a very low chance of making a mistake, but again, it can make mistakes. So yeah, we should check. I would say it worked even better than I would do in Pandoc, at least from my experience. And reviewing a tutorial and actually rewriting it into fitting in a single page, basically making out of like 3 or 4 pages tutorial, a single page tutorial, much smaller and much more compact, and uh, maintaining the availability of like all the commands running after each other, all of this thing works. That also worked quite good with Claude Sonnet in Copilot, and I'm quite happy with the result I got. With the specific note that I did the manual review and I fixed a few, wording issues there, and then we did a technical review which didn't encounter any specific problems. So that's more or less my experience. Some additional resources that I promised. Basically, it's my videos, technical writer skill tree, some blog posts that we did in our company, my colleague Sally Malkin did about the AI usage for documentation purposes. There are some more use cases there that you can see. Some levels of AI coding video that I referenced earlier in the slides. And also, I believe I found this interesting blog post about lessons from the 2026 as a year of AI in some blog post. And I think that's it for my talk. By the way, we are hiring in Canonical for technical authors, documentation platform engineers, and developer relations specialists and community engineers. That's it. Any questions?